everybody, and welcome to another ASMR video here on the channel. In tonight's video, we're going to get straight into the scary stories. You know the deal by now. Reddit, no sleep. So these in theory aren't true, but should be on the more creative side. So hopefully we're going to scare you, but also somehow relax you at the same time, as always is the aim. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, so our first story is titled, I Took My Family to a Water Park. It Ruined Our Lives. Okay buddy, we're right here. If you hurry, we can hit the wave pool before we go. I ruffled Will's hair, gave him a little push. He folded his arms, defiant. The racing slide is the funnest one. Most fun, I corrected. And whatever you say, Willie. He nodded with a humph, satisfied, and scurried off. He weaved his way through the molasses of the crowd, splitting families and couples as he homed in on the dilapidated porta potty. This was one of the few recent attempts Will had dared to use the bathroom all by himself. He was capping a good run, but being out of the house I kept an eye on the door for any signs of distress. Said it 100 times, I would have noticed anyone coming or going. Maybe 5 seconds I looked away. Was that enough time for him to jump out? And what, run off in the opposite direction? After 5 minutes after he had gone, I got up. I leaned on a casual arm against the porta potty. In a whisper shout over the drone of the few hundred happy ball-goers behind me, "Buddy, it's me. How's it going in there?" There was movement inside, I swear it. I swear it wasn't my imagination. I heard something. I turned and saw my wife, Dippin' Dots in one hand and waving with the other. Can't call it a day at the water park without ice cream. I smiled and wrinkled my nose as a joke. "Alright, Will, I'm coming in." The door was unlocked. I made an effort to open it as little as possible and slip inside. I did a double take, turned a full 360, checked the neighbouring porta potty and returned. No, he couldn't have. I peered down past the toilet seat. Log-sized turds floated in the septic stew below. Will. I stepped outside and circled the porta potty. Will, I called again. My wife appeared next to me holding Lila's hand. "What happened? Where's Will?" she asked. I don't know. He was inside. Lila, did you see him leave at all? My daughter shook her head, thrusting a spoonful of dots into her mouth. "You were supposed to be watching him," my wife said. "I know." I grabbed the arm of a man nearby. "Excuse me, sir. Did you see my son leave this porta potty here?" I described Will in detail. He saw the desperation in my eyes but shook his head. "Sorry. Try the lifeguard station. I'm sure this happens all the time." He wished us luck and I thanked him. My wife was beginning to cry. She was starting to scare Lila. I ran ahead, cutting through one of the splash pads and hopping the fence to the lifeguard station. "Oh, excuse me, sir." Some acne-riddled teenager with a red and white uniform stood up from behind the desk. "You, my son. I can't find my son. Is there some announcement you can make, something?" The teen closed his eyes. "Yeah, give me 1 sec. I'm kind of new, so I think." "I don't have a second. If you can't help, then get me a goddamned manager," I snarled. A petite girl, also in high school by the looks of it, turned the corner, oblivious to the nature of the conversation. "Hey, you can't talk to him like that," she pouted. "There's no need to be rude." I stabbed my finger at her, my temper at the end of its wick. I'll be as rude as I damn well like. Get me an effing manager, or I'll go back there and find one. The police were called, primarily for me. I was screaming, knocking things over, foaming at the mouth, and my wife said, the cops said I would have to calm down or they'd handcuff me. They sent out an announcement over the park's PA system. William, your parents are looking for you at the lifeguard station. If you can find a lifeguard, we can get you back together as soon as possible. Don't worry, the lifeguard manager said. We radioed all our employees. He'll be back in no time at all. As it turns out, lost and found children in places like these is fairly common. The problem was, Will never turned up. How do you go home after that? We stayed as long as we could, but it's not like we could sleep on the slides. So the same day I left for the water park with my family, we returned one short. Lila didn't know what was happening. We told her Will had gotten lost and the police were looking for him. She asked why we weren't looking for him and she began to cry. The funny thing about humans is how simultaneously effective and ineffective we are at lying to ourselves. Because a deep part of yourself, something in your core when you know you can trust it, smells the BS. And yet we'll take that lie and run, far as we can, until our legs give out or we crash face first into a wall. After the first day, that piece of me in my core knew I'd never see Will again, but I ran like hell. My lust for closure deflated my marriage like a water balloon with a leak. I was stupid to think I wouldn't get laughed out of the court during custody proceedings. But the one reprieve I had came yesterday. If I couldn't have answers, if I couldn't have my family or my son back, then I'd have some sweet revenge. This last year I'd been leading media campaigns, doing interviews, degrading myself to what I used to frown on and call an activist, all to destroy the water park that took my son. The park was small and got a lot of bad press in the local outlets where most of their customers were. Apparently this wasn't the first incident in the park's history. Far from it, actually. Having a long list of lawsuits and scandals. But it was the last straw and eventually they were forced to close. Yesterday was the first day of the demolition. I watched it in person, one-man audience, and it felt good. I was getting ready to leave around midday when a commotion in the site held me. Axe, grab the axe. The crew was in mayhem and advantageous to my curiosity. No one was around to stop me hopping the barrier to get a closer look. It's dead. Stop. It's dead. I was too far to see what the men were standing over and crept closer. That's a world record. Call someone. Who? The police. Animal control. Call someone, for goodness sake. Where did you find it? In here. Well, go check it out. Be careful, do. I felt my way along a bulldozer, close enough now, and stuck my head past the edge. The scene made my knees buckle. I couldn't comprehend what I was looking at. Dead and covered in hacks and slash marks was a python. Never mind a snake, it was the largest animal I'd ever seen up close. As long as a school bus, longer even, stretched out. Despite its size, it looked thin, as if it hadn't eaten in weeks. Tell me what happened, one of the construction crew asked a younger member. We was using the machine and clearing the area like you said. Went and knocked over them porta potties, and the dragon came, rearing its head, out one of them holes beneath. The crew began to buzz, taking pictures of the beast and kicking it. The construction man nodded and called for the worker who had gone to check the hole. Come on out, that's a shithole, nothing to find. But boss, the site fell silent. What is it? around the house until I went for the newspaper. After all the pieces were collected, the bones they found belonged to 10 unique skeletons. It was a reticulated python, the invasive one, 26 feet long. Found the humidity of the bark and ice and chose a place it wouldn't be found. Headlined the local paper for a day before it was pulled. Previous owners of the park still had some influence in the area. And what did I get? Closure. I would have rather been buried with my unanswered questions. Okay, so this next story is a long one, so strap in. It's titled, I worked as a night guard at a grocery store. They left a strange set of rules. I saw the job listing 2 weeks ago. Wanted, night guard at West Market in Redacted, PA. 12 AM to 6 AM shift, $21 an hour. The whole thing struck me as odd right off the bat. What kind of grocery store needed a security guard while it closed? Was the crime really that bad? But I needed the money. Badly. And 2 days later, after a phone interview with a man named Clive, I showed up for my first shift. As soon as I pulled up, I sort of understood why they needed a night guard. The grocery store sat at the edge of a rundown strip mall. Large signs reading space for rent hung in the store windows, but judging by the dusty glass and flickering street lamps, no one had taken them up on the offer in years. I parked near the front door, and as I approached the building, I saw a woman hurrying away from the store. You must be Aaron, she said breathlessly, the night guard. That's me. Clive left you some instructions. I put them on the conveyor belt at register 1. She gave me a polite nod and then stepped around me, heading for the only other car in the parking lot. Oh, thanks. Be friendly, my inner voice scolded. She's your new co-worker. I turned around. Hey, what's your name? But she was already diving into the car. The door slammed, the car reeled out of the parking space, and then she was gone. So much for a new friend. I turned back towards the store. The parking lot was completely empty now, and the nearest streetlight was flickering with an odd, erratic rhythm. A cold wind swept in, whipping a crumpled paper bag across the parking lot. Well, here goes nothing. I stepped up to the store. The glass doors squeaked as they parted for me, and then I stepped inside. Despite its outward appearance, the store was actually pretty nice inside. Bright fluorescent light shone from overhead. Jazzy music played from hidden speakers. I headed over to register 1 where a folded piece of paper was waiting for me. I flipped it open and began to read. Dear Aaron, welcome to the West family. We sincerely hope you enjoy your first shift. To help you, we've compiled a list of rules that should make your shift as easy as our fresh-baked apple pie. Number 1. As a night guard, you are expected to patrol the store every half hour, making sure nothing is amiss. You may spend the rest of your time in the break room at the back of the store, monitoring the security camera feeds. Number 2. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. Number 3. If you hear a knocking sound coming from within the freezers in the frozen food aisle, ignore it. Number 4. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been put away, please return it to the shopping cart at the front of the store immediately. Number 5. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Sometimes our meat packages leak. Simply head to the storage closet, get the mop and bucket and clean it up. However, do not step in the puddle or touch it in any way. Number 6. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not call the police or report a break-in, and do not make eye contact with her. Number 7. The music we play throughout the store is a pre-recorded disc of instrumental jazz. If the music ever stops, immediately go to the break room and stay there until it resumes. Number 8. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Thank you so much, and again I hope you enjoy your shift. Clive. I stared at the rules, rereading them slowly. They were so weird. A woman in the store, avoid aisle 7. I'd never been given instructions like this, even when I worked as a bouncer at a nightclub in a bad part of town. Maybe it was a test. They wanted to see how well I could follow instructions, no matter how absurd they were. I looked up at the security camera staring down at me from the corner. Okay, challenge accepted. I glanced at my phone. 12:06. Might as well get my first patrol out of the way now before getting settled in. It was odd walking through the store when it was so empty and quiet. All the breads and muffins had been stored away somewhere. White opaque plastic had been poured down over the vegetable display to keep the cold in. When I got to the end, I made a right into the meat section. Sheets of plastic had been pulled over the meat coolers too. I saw flashes of red throughout the gaps, of massive ribeye and sirloin steaks, big slabs of meat with the bones still intact. I averted my eyes. While I wasn't a vegetarian, I never really liked the sight of raw meat. I turned instead to the aisles. Aisle 3, pasta and sauces, all lined up on the shelves. Aisle 4, cookies and snacks. Aisle 5, aisle 6. Oh right, I wasn't supposed to look at aisle 7. I forced myself to look down at the floor. Yeah, it was stupid, but they told me not to look. In the off chance they were going to check the CCTV footage later to grade my performance, I was going to follow every rule. I continued further into the store. A few minutes later I found the break room, a nondescript brown door with a little square window cut into it. I took note of its location for later. As soon as I was done with this patrol, I was going to break out my laptop and finish watching Friday the 13th 4. And then I was at the west end of the store, the frozen section. I turned down the aisle heading back towards the front, and that's when I saw it. A shopping cart, parked askew in the middle of the aisle. I huffed. Of all the rules, this was the one that annoyed me the most. I was hired to be a security guard, not a clean-up crew. Wasn't it the employees' job to put away all the carts at closing time? Sighing, I began pushing it towards the front of the store. The wheels rolled smoothly underneath me. The jazz music played softly in my ears. I turned at the corner and walked past the cash registers, heading towards the front door. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the jazz music. I stopped, straining my ears to listen. Several seconds of silence went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like someone crying. The hairs on my neck stood on end. There's no one in here, the door's been locked the whole time. Unless a customer had accidentally stayed past closing time. Maybe that employee, the woman I'd run into the parking lot, didn't notice them and locked up before they could get out. "Who's there?" I called out. A wailing sob in response. My heart plummeted. It sounded like a woman. possibly even a child. "I'm coming," I called, breaking into a run. "Where are you?" They didn't reply, they just kept sobbing. I frantically continued in the direction of the sound, calling out to them, telling them everything would be okay. But then I stopped dead. The sound, it was coming from aisle 7. "Do not go down aisle 7, do not look down aisle 7. The rules had been very clear about that. I stopped just short of the aisle, next to an end cap display of mayonnaise, and carefully positioned myself so I was hidden. "I'm going to help you," I called out. "Can you tell me what happened?" They finally spoke, but they didn't answer my question. "Help me," the voice cried. "But please." I wanted to step into the aisle. My foot was already halfway off the floor, ready to run in there and comfort them. But something stopped me. A gut instinct, a little alarm bell going off in my head, because out of all the aisles, what were the chances that this person would be in aisle 7? And besides, they were safe. They were in an empty store with me. It's not like they were in a dark alleyway in the middle of the night. "Come out of the aisle," I called, my voice shaking a little. "Then I'll be able to help you." "Please," the voice replied. "Help me." This is stupid. Clearly some person got stuck in here after closing time and they're just scared. Just go into the aisle and help them get home. But there was another part of my brain, the instinctual lizard brain part, and it was screaming at me to not move a muscle. "Do you need me to call someone?" I tried. "Your parents or family? The police?" "Help me," the voice pleaded again. "Help me." It sounded the same each time they said it. A little stutter at the beginning, an emphasis on me. It almost sounded like a recording or some AI-generated thing looping over and over. It didn't sound natural. "Come out of the aisle," I shouted. "Come out and I'll help you." The sobs got louder, faster, hysterical. "Help me," the voice pleaded again, in a desperate tone that made my stomach twist. I stood there pressed against the mayonnaise display, listening to them sob. Was making my stomach flip-flop, even if it did sound slightly unnatural. I could call the police, I thought they'd know what to do. Except I'd left my cell phone with my backpack at cash register 1, and getting it would mean crossing aisle 7. The rules didn't say anything about walking past aisle 7, just said I shouldn't go down it or look down it. And I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. What if it really was someone who needed help? A child who'd sprained their ankle and couldn't get up? "Don't worry, I'm getting my phone and calling the police," I called out. Then I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold of aisle 7 towards register 1. As soon as I took a step, the crying stopped. Just like that. Violent sobbing, and then, in an instant, nothing. Like a switch had flipped. Then, the footsteps started. Loud, slapping footsteps of someone running down the aisle, way too large to be a child, coming straight at me. My heart dropped. It's a trap, they're coming for me and I'm probably going to die here. But as soon as I made it across the aisle, the sound stopped. All I heard were the soft jazz tunes playing through the speakers overhead. I hightailed it to the break room, completely forgetting about the card I was supposed to return. The break room was small and cramped. The little square window in the door had been blacked out with construction paper from the inside. The only source of light came from the computer screen on the desk, displaying the security camera feeds. I scrolled through the feeds bridge of aisle 7. It seemed like the cameras were intentionally placed to avoid that aisle. After searching the grainy black and white video for anything amiss, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. When I finally opened them again, it was almost 12:30. Time for my next patrol. I didn't want to go. I felt safe here, locked up in this little room. But I also knew I wouldn't be safe if I didn't listen to the rules. I shuddered, imagining what would have happened to me if I'd have gone down aisle 7, if I hadn't listened. I pulled myself out of the seat and headed for the door. The store was completely silent. No hysterical sobbing or pounding footsteps. I started my patrol near the back, walking up aisle 7. Cans of food glinted on the shelves as I passed, but when I glanced at them I didn't see any labels I recognised. No chef ravioli or giant green men, just generically labelled cans of meat stew. In fact, all the aisle had was meat stew, the same cans over and over and over. I reached the end and turned right towards the front of the store, and that's when I realised that I had already broken one of the rules. The cart, I hadn't returned it. It wasn't where I left it. Instead of haphazardly parked near aisle 7, it sat next to one of the cash registers, like some ghost man was checking out his groceries. I paused for a second, hands hovering above the handle. Then I grabbed it and headed towards the door. Outside, the parking lot was pitch black, not a single street lamp. The shopping carts are only a few feet from the door, I told myself. Just go in and out, it'll take 2 seconds. I did it as quickly as possible. I ran into the darkness, slammed the shopping cart into the row and dashed back inside. Then I shut the doors and clicked the lock. Okay, that wasn't too bad, I said to myself, letting out a sigh of relief. For a second I revelled in the peace of the store, the silence, the safety of being locked inside with no one else with me. But then I stopped. The silence. Oh no. The jazz music wasn't playing. How long had it been off? I'd been so preoccupied with returning the card I wasn't even paying attention. I broke into a sprint towards the back of the store, cookies and snacks flashing by me. Then I swerved right and sprinted into the break room. I pulled out the lists and read them over and over again. Do not under any circumstances end your shift early. Why did he write that? Was it just because he didn't want anyone flaking out on him? Or if I left early, would some horrible fate befall me? Because I really, really wanted to leave. I opened my backpack, pulled out the soda I'd brought and popped it open, took a sip and scrolled through the security feed. 5 more hours. The next 4 patrols went fairly well. The rules didn't say how long they had to be, so every 30 minutes I sprinted a lap around the store as fast as I could. The whole thing took about a minute. Then for the other 29 I locked myself in the break room. On the second patrol I heard knocking stood up, shaking out my nervous energy, preparing myself to sprint. I'd been a runner back in high school, but in the past 10 years I'd gotten way out of shape. The last patrol had left me panting and breathless, legs aching. My hand closed around the doorknob. My heart hammered in my chest. 3, 2, 1, go. I wrenched the door open and shot out of the store, but I didn't get very far. There was an enormous ball of blood on the floor. I froze, all the air sucked out of my lungs. I stared at the blood shining in the fluorescent lights. The rule said to clean it up, but that would take at least 10 minutes. I wasn't safe out here. I swallowed. I hurried back to the supply closet, got a mop and a bucket and started cleaning as fast as I could. The job was messy. I slid the mop through the blood, then dunked it in the bucket, rinsed and repeat. The soapy water tinged red. A few times it splashed up and almost landed on me. But I did it. I cleaned it all up without touching a drop. Unfortunately, by the time I was finished it was 3:27. Time for my next patrol. I was too tired to run, so I settled for a brisk walk around the store. I headed up through the frozen food. I noticed now there were handprints on the glass doors. Handprints of all sizes, tilted and smudged. Except the proportions looked all wrong. With fingers that were too long, too thin. I averted my eyes and kept going. 2.5 more hours. My footsteps clicked across the tile floor. The jazz was starting to grate on my nerves. I must have heard the same looping saxophone medley 20 times now. It made me want to punch something. Sighing, I continued towards the produce section, briskly walking past the aisles. Then I stopped. Something caught my eye in one of the aisles. I backed up and took a better look. Someone was standing in aisle 9. A woman. She wore a blue linen dress and black high heels. Long black hair cascaded down her back almost to her waist. She faced away from me, standing still, her thin white arms hanging limply at her sides. In her hand was a shopping basket, filled with cuts of raw meat. The rules echoed in my head. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not make eye contact with her. I slowly backed up as quietly as I possibly could. Then I started down the next hall towards the break room. I heard her footsteps echo against the tile. I hurried my pace towards the break room, but then I stopped. Her footsteps weren't coming from behind me. They were coming from in front of me. I averted my eyes to the floor just as I saw 2 black high-heeled shoes step into the aisle. I stared at the floor. Do not make eye contact with her. Do not make eye contact with her. The words repeated over and over in my head, but I had to get to the break room and she was standing in my way. All I could see were her shiny high-heeled shoes and the little drops of blood that leaked out of the meat packages in her basket, staining the floor. I backed up. That was the only way I could go. I kept my eyes on the floor, careful not to look up, but she was following me. Click, click. For every step I took, I saw a shiny black heel come into view, attached to a thin white calf extend, keeping time with me. I quickened my pace. So did she. Click, click, click. I wheeled around and broke into a sprint. Click, click, click. I ran down an aisle at random and sprinted towards the break room, but then, halfway down the aisle, I stopped. A shopping cart was parked. itself in a pose reminiscent of a crying child, but it obviously wasn't anything resembling a human, with its strange lumps and appendages and complete lack of head. I'd stepped into aisle 7. I immediately reversed direction, but not before the thing unfolded itself and began to move towards me. I whipped around and, screaming, sprinted down the next aisle. Miraculously, I made it to the end in one piece. I veered sharply left towards the break room. Almost there, almost there. My hand hit the doorknob. I wrenched it open and dove inside. Then I collapsed in the chair, panting. I sucked in a breath, staring at the locked door. Am I really safe in here? Technically, the rules never said I would be safe. Maybe staying in here only decreased my chance of death. I turned my attention to the security camera feed on the monitor. It showed the middle of the store, and from what I could see, the aisles were empty. No trace of the woman. I switched to the next feed, the produce section. Empty. I switched to the next one. I jumped. She was standing right there, in front of the break room door. She stood so still the image could have been a photograph, except for the blood slowly dripping from the meat in her basket. I swallowed and glanced away from the monitor. At the door, my heart slammed into my ribs when I saw her shadow under the door. Go away, please go away, I pleaded in my mind. The shadow of her head in the window tilted as if contemplating her next move. Now I knew why the window had been covered. I forced my eyes away and looked back at the screen. She was still standing there, except there was something different about the way she was standing. I squinted at the grainy black and white image, trying to figure out what was going on. When my eyes finally fell on her heels, I realized they were facing forward, but I was still looking at the back of her head, at the long black hair cascading to her waist. Either her hair was hanging over her face, or she turned her head all the way around. It must have been 20 minutes before she began to walk away from the door. I couldn't tell if it was just the low frame rate or those crummy cameras, but her movements looked jerky, her body lurching with each step. It made me sick to watch. When she disappeared from the screen, I let out a breath of relief. My hands and legs were shaking, weak. Okay, think. The rule said to wait until she left. All I had to do was watch the feed by the front door. As soon as I saw her leave the store, I'd be safe. After a few minutes of sitting there, waiting for my heart rate to return to normal, I forced my fingers back to the keyboard. I pressed the arrow key to move to the next feed, then the next, and the next, looking for the camera at the front of the store. No. Her face. Her face filled the entire screen. Her eyes filled me with horror. They were pure white, no pupils, no irises, just pure white eyes threaded with spidery veins. I screamed and jumped back. Then I shut my eyes. The rule said don't make eye contact. Did that count? Through the screen. I let out a terrified, shuddering wail and covered my face with my hands, my entire body shaking. When I finally took a peek through my fingers, I saw her rapidly scaling down the wall, away from the camera on the ceiling like some kind of spider. Then she pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the night. She had left. I was safe, or as safe as I could be, in this cursed grocery store. I glanced at the clock. 3:58 a.m. Time to patrol. I really didn't forced myself to swing the door open and run as fast as I could through the store. I saw shopping carts stacked in teetering towers, heard hands pounding against the freezer doors, saw little spots of blood on the shiny tile from the woman as she'd stalked me. And then a minute later I was done. I locked myself in the break room, and for the first time in years began to sob. The remaining patrols went by without incident, though I did hear more sobbing from aisle 7 and more banging from the freezers. And then the hour had come. 6 a.m. My heart soared at the sight of the pink dawn sky through the glass doors. I was safe. I was free. When I glanced out into the parking lot, I saw a few cars pulling in, disgruntled, groggy employees clutching coffees, heading towards me. As soon as the first one came in, I flew out of the store, ran to my car, and got out of there as fast as I could. I'd never felt such relief, such happiness. I felt like a new man. All of my problems, even my financial ones, seemed dwarfed by what I had just endured. When I pulled onto the main road, I rolled down my windows and flicked on the radio. But it wasn't my usual classic rock station that blared through the speakers. Instead, I heard the upbeat tune of a saxophone. And as I listened to that horrible looping melody, I realised that my days as a night guard for West Market might not be over yet. Okay, so our third story is titled AI Keeps Tagging My Dead Friend in My Photos. I use a photo storage service. It's like Google or Apple Photos, with some AI-powered features and facial recognition. One of the things it does is tag people that it recognises across multiple photos. It keeps tagging my friend Addie Hemsworth. There's just one problem. She's been dead for a year. She passed our sophomore year. I won't go into details because I don't want to dox myself here. Addie Hemsworth is not her real name, but her death made national news. Of course it did. It was the homicide of a white female college student. The racist mainstream media eats those cases up like crack. Anyway, the whole tagging thing started about a week ago. I was scrolling through photos from Mike's birthday party when I noticed the app was tagging Addie. The circled area was right over my shoulder, like Addie was standing right behind me. Except of course she wasn't. I zoomed in on the darkness and turned the brightness up on my phone, but I couldn't see anything. Just mashed pixels and blobby darkness. Interesting sound from my stomach. I assumed it was just a glitch, although the app had never tagged anyone wrong before. But then it happened again. I took a selfie of myself because I'd done my hair for the frat party later, and the app suggested the same thing. It circled a little space behind me, with the name Addie, as if she was standing behind my bed. This time, however, the circle was several feet off the ground. Even if she were alive, even if she were standing behind me, she wouldn't be anywhere near that high. A chill ran down my spine. I decided I needed to get out. I ran out of the dorm and walked randomly up campus, towards the language art lecture halls, all held in enormous Gothic stone buildings. The first leaves were beginning to turn orange, like the sunlight was singeing just the edges of campus. A couple laughed as they passed me. A bird squawked somewhere. I kept walking foot over foot. I found myself standing at the entrance of Addie's dorm, Dentonhall 12B. I looked up at the window. It was closed. 12B had stayed empty this year out of respect for Addie. was in the photo. I let out the breath I'd been holding and started walking back towards my dorm. Halfway back, when I came across a tree halfway orange, in the throes of autumn unlike the others, I lifted my phone and snapped a photo without even thinking about it. Later that evening, I realised the app said Addie was there. The circle was on the grass as if she were lying on the ground, dead. The most horrible image flashed through my head of Addie sprawled out on the ground covered in gashes, blood pooling on the ground seeping through the grass, sightless eyes turned towards me, mouth hanging open. 17 stab wounds, they said. I shut my eyes and forced the image out of my head. Then I took a screenshot and sent it to our group chat. "Lol, my phone thinks Addie is in this photo," I wrote, trying to pass it off as a joke, as some kind of messed up defense mechanism. 3 dots appeared and then a text from Priyanka. I thought it was only me. She sent a screenshot of her iPhone photo app. The most recent photo of Addie, the app claimed, was a photo of Priyanka and Greg standing under one of the Gothic archways on campus. No one else was in the photo. My throat went dry. It could be a glitch once, maybe twice on my phone. But if it's happening to my other friends' phones too. Before I could reply, another text came in from Adam. "It's happening to me too." I stared at my phone, feeling chills. I got up and walked across the hallway to the girls' bathroom. Every bit of my body was shaking. I went to the sink and stared at my reflection. Deep bags lay under my eyes. My dark hair was tangled and uncombed. I don't remember looking this bad earlier. I shut my eyes tight and shook my head, trying to shake the anxiety out of me. Then I opened my eyes, and all the blood drained out of my face. There were 2 feet poking out from under one of the store doors, wearing mint green flip-flops. Her flip-flops. The polish on her bare toes was chipped. Dark liquid pooled under her flip-flops. It slowly crept over the ground between the tiles, towards the floor drain, towards me. No. I whipped around, but nothing was there. I burst back into the dorm room, my heart hammering. I broke out in sobs, holding myself shaking. This was the one time I hated not having roommates. Hated that I was so introverted I made sure to get a single. No one to hear me. When I'd recovered slightly, I picked up my phone to text the group. The floor fell out under me when I saw the notification from the Photos app. Addie Hemsworth was tagged in every single one of my photos. The phone fell out of my hands and clattered to the floor. I closed my eyes and cried harder, unable to move. When I finally opened them, through my blurry tears, I noticed something different. There were 2 shiny scars slicing at my arms. I tore off my clothes. There were more. I counted every single one, but I already knew how many there would be. 17. Interesting. That makes it sound like she was the one that killed Addie, or her and her friends. And they're getting haunted like crazy. This next story is titled, "My Dad Was Stealing My Blood." Every night around 7 p.m, the door to my dimly lit bedroom creaked open. My dad always entered with a glass of water and 2 white pills. His footsteps soft, measured as if he was afraid of waking something. time for your medicine, Sarah," he'd say gently. I swallowed the pills without question. The bitter taste clung to my throat as they slid down. Then the drowsiness would set in as he sat and watched me. "You're on the road to recovery now. Soon you'll get to go to college," he would say. I would feel myself nodding off, dreaming about the future life waiting for me. The next day was always the same. Endless tests, blood drawn like ritual offerings, nurses plunging needles into my skin while my dad talked about my health and future treatments. My dad analysed my blood for hours, believing it held the answers we needed. I trusted him. He was my dad. And then Emily arrived. She was different from the other nurses. Most of the other nurses had faded into the background, their faces blurring together in the shadows. But Emily was sharp, alive. Her eyes were deep and warm. "Hello, Sarah," she said the first time we met, adjusting my blanket. "How are you feeling today?" "The same," I said weakly. Emily stayed in the room longer than the others. She waited until we were alone one night, then asked me a question no one else ever had. "Do you ever wonder why you need these pills?" she asked, her voice calm but probing. "They are helping me get better," I said confidently. Her gaze softened and she gave me a smile, but it was an odd smile, almost sad. "Maybe," she said, before moving on. From that day forward, the questions grew louder in my mind. Why did I need the pills? And what was wrong with me? One stormy night, Emily stayed even longer than usual. Thunder rumbled in the distance, rain drumming furiously against the window. There was an odd calmness inside it. It almost felt like the house itself was holding its breath. "Sarah," Emily whispered, leaning closer to me, her face more intense than ever. "You're not sick. You've never been sick." "What? My dad says I would die without my treatments." "He's lying to you," she snapped back, her voice almost a whisper but still urgent. "He's keeping you weak, keeping you from remembering." "Remembering what?" I asked, confused. "What you are," Emily replied, her face grim. "You're not human, Sarah." I opened my mouth to respond, but a creak from the hallway froze us both. Margaret, my oldest nurse, stepped into the room, her usual bad mood visible across her face. "Your shift ended an hour ago," she hissed at Emily. Her eyes darted between us, cold and calculating. "It's time for you to go." Emily stood tall, her shoulders squared up towards Margaret. "Sarah deserves the truth." Margaret slowly reached into her pocket, pulling out a syringe filled with a glowing liquid. "You're meddling where you shouldn't be." My bedroom seemed to darken as Margaret took a step towards Emily, but Emily's hand shot out, stopping Margaret in her tracks, and then everything changed. Emily's body began to twist, her bones cracking and reshaping. Her skin rippled as her form expanded, her once human face distorted into something monstrous, both hulking and terrifying. Long claws sprouted from her hands and her teeth, now sharp and glinting in the dim light. flailing uselessly before finally falling limp. The metallic scent of blood drifted in the air. When it was over, Emily stood over the mangled remains of Margaret, her chest heaving, a monstrous form covered with blood. I couldn't breathe. My heart raced in my chest, fear surging through me. Emily then turned to me, her terrifying features softening as her body slowly shrank and returned back to its human shape. Her eyes, still sharp and warm, found mine. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said softly, wiping the blood from her hands, but she wasn't going to let you leave. I couldn't find any words, my whole body shook. "I know you're scared," Emily continued, stepping closer, her voice gentler now, "but you need to know the truth. You're your guy, Sarah. That's why Edison has been giving you those pills, drawing your blood. He's been using your blood for transfusions to keep himself and his friends young." "Your guy?" I asked. "We're not from here. You must trust me." The world tilted and my mind was reeling. Your guy? My dad was stealing my blood. Nothing made sense, and yet it felt right, like a piece of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "Edison's not your real father. You were taken from your real family in Japan," Emily continued, pulling a small wooden charm from her pocket. It was a small raccoon, intricately carved from dark wood. "I've been searching for you ever since. As soon as I looked at the charm, memories I didn't know I had flooded back. I was running through forests and changing into anything I could imagine. You are Tanuki and I am Kitsune." "I am Tanuki," she nodded. "We are both your guy. You must remember, feel it," she said. "We have been great friends since we came to being. I was there the day Edison's company kidnapped you from our home in Hokkaido." Emily held up her left arm and pulled up her sleeve, revealing a deep, jagged scar. "They almost got me too," she said. My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of the bed, gasping for air. Emily knelt beside me, her expression soft but serious. "It's time to go, Sarah. He'll come for you soon. I don't know what tools he has at his disposal." I nodded, my mind still swimming in confusion and fear. But beneath it all something else stirred. Something powerful, something ancient. Emily offered me a hand, and though my heart was pounding, I grabbed it. I could feel the strength returning to my body, strength I didn't know I had. She helped pull me out of the bed. We stepped out through the window into the night together, leaving the only life I knew behind. I knew it would take time to remember my life before captivity. The storm was raging, but I wasn't afraid. I was something else, something more. I don't think that one was too scary, to be honest. But that is going to be the last video for tonight. The last story for tonight's video. It's kind of a shit. I mean, maybe some people find that one scary, but I don't really find that kind of stuff scary. I think the long grocery store one was definitely the best. Definitely one of the best written stories that we've ever read on this series. But yeah, hopefully this should have been an hour. Now, we are approaching October, and I kind of had a little idea to, I believe, I usually upload Thursdays, and I think this year Halloween actually is on a Thursday. So I figured to commemorate this sort of scary event, it would only be right if we did a scary stories video, but I think for the first time ever on the channel, I'm going to do a 2-hour long video, and I feel it's only right that we do a 2-hour long scary stories video, so keep your eyes peeled for that, because I feel like that could be a lot of fun. I'm going to need regular breaks in between, but I'm going to really try and find like the highest rated ones of the month, and we sit there for 2 hours straight and just whisper through them. But I think I've got planned another scary stories Let's Not Meet before that, so keep your eyes peeled for that as well. But that is going to do it for